All right, welcome everyone. So we're going to ask everybody to participate today. So I'm going to ask everybody to unmute if they wouldn't mind. And what I'm looking for today is, we do, obviously, I talk to a lot of people that are clients, but also a ton of people that aren't clients that call up and that we deal with Dr. Peterson, same thing. And what I've been noticing recently is a lot of stagnant practices, kind of, I would say stuck, not growing, and it's the same old, same old. And I would like to hear from everybody a little bit on what they would put on their list of things that they think really move the dial in a practice. What really makes a difference in growth and driving a practice, not incremental growth, 5% a year, that kind of thing. Talking real substantial growth where you're growing by 15, 20% in a year, 10%, in that zone. We'll start off with Dr. Peterson and then kind of move through everybody. If everybody participate and kind of give us a list of things that they think really make a difference. And I want to kind of talk about each one of those things. And of course, I'll throw in my 2 cents. But first, let's start off with Dr. Peterson. What on your short list, let's say 2 or 3 things that you really think really move a dial in a practice. What's on your list?
Probably the top would be a good, strong leader. The office manager or clinic administrator has to be confident, be intelligent, and be totally on board, dedicated to the doctor's vision and willing to encourage and build the enthusiasm with the rest of the staff to make it happen. The offices that I see that grow slowly or have a lot of frustrations and lots of pushback along the way are ones that typically have weak leaders. The offices that have doubled in 3 or 4 years, and I don't mean doubling from 50,000 a month to 100,000. I mean going from 2 million a year to 4 or 5 million a year. That it takes really strong leaders, and the doctor also has to be willing to trust and train the leaders, especially the office manager, to be sure that he's not or she's not a blockage. Sometimes the doctors are their own biggest problem.
Mhm.
We tend to be, and I speak for myself, but also from my observations, we tend to be kind of OCD, kind of micromanagers, because our world has been for the last number of years, in my case, a lot of them, our world is millimeters and portions of millimeters and fractions of millimeters and margins that are at least or no greater than 50 angstroms open. I've never quite figured out how you can ensure that. And supposedly we're supposed to be able to feel it, but these are the kind of things that we learn and we really had hammered into our heads as we were in school, and we were graded on it. And that's hard to give up. It transfers then, I think, to wanting to be involved in managing everything to be sure it's done right, because we know when we're responsible, it's got to be done right. And we're responsible for the dental care, we're responsible for the office. And for the offices to really take off and grow, we have to be able to have a leader that we trust, that has shown that he or she is capable, can inspire people, can manage people, and can make your workplace the kind of place where people are proud to work. Those are the common things that I see in the offices that grow the most, and frankly, are able to take a leap of faith from time to time. If you're running out of room and you're capacity block and you're working out of 3 or 4 operatories with a minimal staff, you're going to hit the wall. There's areas where you just can't grow any further. And sometimes, as Greg used to say, sometimes just to add 1 chair means you're going to have to spend $1 million, because to add that 1 chair, you got to move into a whole different location, and probably $1 million is cheap anymore. For being able to do internal improvements and to expand or build your own building. I don't believe in field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. But if you have your systems in place, your leadership in place, your team in place, and it's solid, and you've just frankly outgrown your facility, you're not really taking a big risk. Your bigger risk is to try to stay where you are, because you're not going to be able to grow very much.
Okay, so you've got leadership as number 1 on your list. Is there anything else you would say, like, that you'd also put on the list of what it takes to really grow?
Well, step out of your comfort zone, meaning it can mean a lot of things. That might mean marketing for the first time, and actually engaging in some marketing. And as much as we were always taught that was a dirty word, it frankly is the way of the world now with everything. So marketing can be very successful. It can be a dud. So having people that you can work with is good, but marketing can make a huge difference in bringing in patients. And then I'd say the next thing would be getting out of your comfort zone, looking at additional procedures, treatments that you can offer that probably aren't covered by insurance or involve so much with insurance management. Those can be certain cosmetic things, although today almost everybody's a cosmetic dentist. But it can be other things that patients really want, and that is sedation. Sedation is, we've heard us say that a lot of times, but it works. It's very successful. I have offices that are very successful with sedation, both IV and in some cases just strictly oral. So sedation is something. Implants are something the public's aware of. Back in the late
5,
80s.
6, 7 years ago, it wasn't quite like that, but now it is. Yeah.
Well, even in the 90s, especially the early 90s, a lot of implants were still pretty much experimental, as were a lot of bone grafting procedures and other things that we were doing. But the body of literature and people presenting quality courses on it was much lower than today. So if you're comfortable with surgery, look into not only restoring implants, but learning how to place them. With CT scans now as part of your typical office equipment, you have huge advantages. In the 90s, I used to have to send my patients that needed CT scans, which was the bulk of them, to a medical facility. And just getting the CT scans I needed would be $1,000. And then they'd have to go through SimPlant or one other software that would reconfigure it to what we wanted so we could do the things that we do. But CT scans are awesome. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have them, but bone density, thickness, different, it just makes a world of difference as opposed to going with 2-dimensional x-rays. So I think those 3 things are all part of the category of how you grow successfully. But it all goes back to having that key person that you believe in that takes care of everything while you're in the back treating patients.
All right, so I want to hear from you all. So if somebody wants to chime in and add to this list, I've got a few things that I'll add to the list, and then we're going to talk about each one of these things and break them down and, well, try to overcome them. So does anybody want to chime in on what they think really drives a practice forward for real, not just incremental growth, real growth? Anyone?
I think that's Dr. Davidson that I see there. I know he's he's grown tremendously. He has a big practice in Des Moines. So very successful, number of associates and partners. So Dr. Davidson, if that's you, would you like to make some comments? I could be wrong.
Yeah,
Maybe it's not Dr. Davidson.
anybody at all, before I go, does anybody want to comment on this list? So Dr.
There,
Peters,
I'm unmuted there, Ron.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Save me. I thought, oh my God.
Little technological flub there. Hey, it's good to see you all again. Hey, so sorry about Greg's passing. That's been very difficult for me. I've
yeah,
been with him since the early 80s and very difficult. Um, I'm going to chime in with you on this, Ron, about capacity. Um, when when we built our new building after 25 years of practice, um, it was a very challenging moment to do that. But then we exploded with growth. It was just explosive growth when we had the capacity. And that was at the same time that I started adding associates. And then my son joined the practice. And so we went from me, who was wearing out in life, to we had me plus 6 doctors. And then the next thing that I think really made a huge difference, in addition to what you were talking about, leadership, Ron, that was excellent, was education with new procedures. And you were talking about implants in particular. Um, we started doing big cases with implants, and those big cases and with sedation um, really started, really pulling in a lot of patients. We did marketing, almost exclusively. We did radio advertising when we were having the big growth, but I also did marketing way back in the olden days. I did yellow page advertising back when that was actually a thing. But the marketing was big, and I think the radio advertising, the thing that was kind of there were two unintended consequences on that. One was we started having other dentists refer to us some of their trouble patients, and it was okay because they were right in our wheelhouse of being able to treat them. And so, so our dental friends that were referring to us their troubles, we did them a favor and they did us a favor all at the same time, and the patient was the ultimate winner in it. And so I think that was a big mover on the dial. Um, so if I were gonna identify the big movers, it would be those items.
okay, it's good. I think it's very good. Anybody else want to add to this list before we start going through it? Anybody else want to put anything on the list? So right now I got, okay, strong leadership, marketing. Uh, we talked about obviously expanding, and kind of Dr. Peterson was saying kind of when to expand. There's a right time and a wrong time. So I think I would like to cover kind of when to expand. When is it right to take the risk, right? Uh, I think, and then adding big cases. So both of you guys talked about that, and that would be sedation, implants, and things like that. I would add a few more things to this list. So one, I would say a culture of same day service, a culture of pushing for production in the practice would be actually, I would say that is what the leader's supposed to do, that's the byproduct of having good leadership. But if you don't have, you can have a great leader and then a poor team. The net result has to be, you have to have this culture in place that the whole team is driving the practice forward, almost kicking and screaming, even against your will sometimes. So I would say building kind of that morale. Next that I'd put on the list would be a large amount of patient-to-patient referrals, meaning a very healthy amount of people referring friends and family to the practice. I would also put building out hygiene, where hygiene is expanding and it's just growing and busting at the seams, and patients are waiting out the door for your services. And then, of course, good case acceptance. This would be kind of the short list of things that make the difference in a practice. And I want to start with this leadership thing. Because I totally agree. In working with practices, and within the first month of working with a new client, I can kind of tell if we got the right leader or not, or if it's shaky. And sometimes you kind of get a B leader. So you think of A, B, and C players, right? You get a leader that's pretty good, but not excellent. And that's probably the toughest challenge. And I think a lot of you all get stuck in this zone where your leader's pretty good, but really not to the level of really excellent. And in your opinion, Dr. Peterson, what is the difference between good and excellent?
Well, let's talk about the person first and then talk about the situation. You have to have someone who believes in what you believe, someone who is intelligent and learns quickly, and someone who has a good, I hesitate to say dynamic personality, but certainly one that can relate with people, can do all the things that are difficult to do. Hiring, firing, teaching, those things are incredible skills, organizational skills. I have a couple of CAs that I work with that just blow me away at their level of organization and all the things that they do to support the office when they're not even in the office. Listening to podcasts, reading business books, and we have some that I like and I like to recommend, watching certain TED Talks, YouTubes. There's just so much information out there, and you can pick things out of all these sources. So having the person, and they're hard to find. Look, I get it. Some of them that I work with, two of that I work with.
What you're saying is it's
are hygienists.
finding somebody with some kind of thirst for knowledge is important. Yes. Yeah. I would definitely agree. Finding a great leader is probably the toughest challenge. No doubt. And what is a great leader? That's really hard to quantify. Really struggle with it. So there's two aspects to great leadership. One is high accountability, meaning they hold a high standard for the team and everybody knows it, and it's even. They don't treat anybody differently, right? So that would be there, but then also high amount of empathy for the team, meaning they really care about each individual as a person. And creating that or finding that person, it's very, very difficult. Developing it is probably where you're at. And I would say the dynamic between the doctor and the leader is also extremely important. Obviously, doctor owner is what I mean. So Dr. Peterson, you were talking a little bit about kind of a micromanager doctor who really doesn't let go of the reins to a leader. Um, and then there's letting go too early where they're not ready. So there's developing up a leader can take years, to be honest. Some people have it somewhat naturally, but for the most part, what we're seeing is these people have to be developed up over years. And their job is really to create the culture. So remember I said that the kind of two go hand in hand. Their job is to really create this culture of driving the practice forward, and with this kind of today, not tomorrow mentality, where they're focused on driving the production each day. And you can kind of really tell when we talk to your teams and interview everybody, we can really get a sense of how how infused is that really in the culture? The same day service, driving to build the day, or do they just kind of, oh, today stinks, but tomorrow looks good, and they kind of just wrap up today and just forget about it? That is bad culture. Uh, Driving the practice forward, looking for same day service, talking about it in the morning huddles, actually being motivated, talking about it over the walkie talkies, talking about it at lunch, talking about it all day, moving patients into today that are booked out tomorrow, the next day, and the following day to make sure today is as busy as it can be. These are all things that you'll see in a great team that has great leadership. Uh,
You know,
and
Wes, also I just want to add, I agree with everything you're saying, but in many cases, it's also a journey that you and the CA or your manager take together.
oh, absolutely.
It's
That's
not,
that
yeah,
that dynamic between the doctor and the leader has to be good. I mean, you guys, like I think you were saying, Dr. Peterson, you guys got to think alike.
yes.
Got to be in lockstep. You've got to like this person and like being around them, uh, because that journey, like you said, is together. Um, Now, I will say, in full disclosure, that once this leader gets the practice up to 300,000 or 400,000 a month, and it's doing 4 million, and they built the practice, built the culture, their importance is not quite as great as it once was. We can move players in and out of that seat. I don't want to say predictably, but it's not, you're not going to have some big fall off. It's kind of getting the practice to start actually moving and ramping up is this person's ability and really to really get the team whipped into shape and hold them accountable, and have the team trust in, you hear these stories about great leaders, army leaders and things like that, where people are willing to die for their leader. It's kind of a weird thing, you have a great leader if that's how your team feels about this person, that they really trust that person. And that's what really can take a practice into new levels.
Now that's
Uh,
the cultural change that is again as inspired by the leader and the doctor, and frankly, what level of accountability you demand from
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Because the lower the level of accountability you have, people will drop to that. And the higher accountability you require, people will rise to it or they'll leave. And you get better people who will rise to it.
one
It can be
thing
a challenge.
one thing I've seen about owner doctors and owner doctors holding people accountable uh, can be not good. Let's just put it that way. So if the owner doctor comes in with all their weight and really wants to start holding people accountable, uh, you come. Greg always used to say this: anything you say, even if you whisper it, it's like you're screaming at them. What you say carries so much weight and so much authority that it's just not the same. And you running around and trying to really hold people accountable can have the opposite effect. It can destroy people, literally destroy people, where they can't do anything right. You've heard of sports performance anxiety. This is where the simplest things you screw up on because you get nervous. That's what happens to your team. If you get involved and really start holding people to the fire, all of a sudden they can't do anything right, even the most basic things. So you got to be careful. And this is why you got to work through leaders and have them have discussions with people. This whole chain of command and how it's put together is very important that you follow that chain of command, because if you don't, you can destroy your team, but you can also undermine your leader. I want to repeat that because if you start going and going behind the back and coaching people up and holding people accountable around your leader, you will undermine their authority. And then you have a toothless tiger. You don't really have a leader. So you got to be very careful about how you interact with your team and your leader, because you can destroy everything in 2 seconds by nullifying what your leader's doing, he or she. So
May I give an example?
go ahead.
I've talked with an office in Los Angeles area. I won't say I've worked with them. I'll say I've talked with them a couple times. It's a very large office, multiple satellite offices too. But a textbook on how not to run a business. There are roughly 3 people who are continually struggling to be at the top of the leadership pyramid. None of them is officially the leader, but they're always undermining each other. But really the biggest problem, of course, besides the doctor, is the entire culture that's developed. This is the only office I've seen where approximately half of the staff belongs to the Teamsters Union. And that, I'm serious, they are actually unionized. Now, not the whole staff and not some of the leaders. But when I found this, I was kind of surprised, very surprised actually. But I was talking to the one person who's mostly the clinical leader. I said, well, tell me something. How many times a day do you hear "not my job"? And she said, more times than you can count. Because you've got a unionized shop and people have descriptions of their job. And if it isn't in the description, they don't do it. And they're belligerent about it because they're protected by the union. The doctor knows now it was a huge mistake, but this is what he's dealing with. Try to establish the type of culture that we know is successful in a dental office may be impossible with them, just because of the situation they've created and the dichotomy of expectations from the people that are there, from all the way from the top leadership down. Different problems, but all about everybody's out for themselves. Nobody is really working for the good of the office, and there's no shared vision. Everybody's vision is about themselves. So I don't know if that office will ever be anything different than what it is, but it's a nightmare right now.
Yeah, so your relationship with the leader and you guys interact is like I said, you can't jump the chain of command. You've got to work through that leader. I always say that when you dictate something that the leader has to do, they have to take it to the team as if they thought of it. That you're literally not saying anything. You're the good cop. And the leader comes to the team as if she or he thought of the idea. And so that whole dynamic has to happen to create this, like I said, this culture with the team where they're highly efficient, highly accountable, and there is this culture of same day service, today, not tomorrow. And once you kind of get that, that's when the engine really starts to take off. But there are some other things. So we talked about a few other things that really move the dial. Marketing. Marketing can move the dial. So we have practices that I've worked with that have cold starts, meaning they start with 0 patients, and it hangs literally 100% off the marketing. So they open up, they've got 0 patients that month. And what I've learned is you can make it just off of new patients solely. So in these cold starts, we kind of are spending 8, 9, 10,000 a month in marketing, so heavy marketing load, and we're able to ramp the practice up over 100,000 a month in 6 months, and within 18 months, it's doing 200,000 a month. So you can propel a practice forward, getting marketing dialed in. Okay, so the couple things that happen with marketing. One is you got to get a good marketing company. which there are fewer and fewer out there. You've got to stay away from spending money that doesn't work. So your marketing companies are famous for trying to push you into spending a lot of money on SEO, spending a lot of money on social media, spending a lot of money on banner ads, or stuff that very low accountability, and I guess probably they make more money when you do that. The vast majority of the dollars need to be spent in Google pay-per-click, where uh, it's just pay to play. You want 80–90% of your dollars spent there and not wasted in other places. Then you have to track kind of the quality of patients that you're getting. So sometimes we'll end up with too many emergencies, and you have to look at your keywords and make sure that you've got a nice balance. You're looking for around 70–30. 70% coming through hygiene, establishing more comprehensive, and 30% emergency based. So when you're running these pay-per-clicks, you got to track all that and make sure that you're getting those kind of results. You should be getting new patients for right around $150 to $170 per new patient, somewhere in that zone. So say anything below $200 a new patient. Next with marketing is getting the phones answered correctly, which this is such a nightmare that I can't even describe to you how difficult it is to get your teams to actually answer marketing patients correctly and get them through the door. So I told you guys about that software that we're using now. That AI software tracks all new patient phone calls, categorizes them by team member, uh, and we can go through and click each one and follow and check the success rate and everything. It is so abysmal when working with a new client that starts marketing. It's shocking. And getting your team to get into the 80–90% close rate on the phone as far as getting new patients through the door takes me about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks of working with a team, listening to phone calls, playing them back to them, pointing out all the little failures, where they messed up, all that kind of stuff. It takes a while. So getting marketing work, it's so you got the marketing itself, you got answering the phone, and then you got case acceptance. So most of you don't even track your case acceptance, or you kind of do. Maybe you got some software that spits out a number, and it's almost like a worthless number. It doesn't really give you how you're really doing. You've got to track your case acceptance off of marketing. You have to get around $800 per new patient through marketing spent in the practice first month. And that's just the number. You have to get really closer to a 4-to-1 return. You've heard the 3-to-1 return. For every dollar you spend in marketing, you want $3 back. Well, in this scenario in dentistry, we're shooting for 4-to-1 return. And that ought to be your goal. Once you've established that and kind of like you might do a marketing budget for $2,000, and you're going to get 12 new patients from that. And you track all your statistics, make sure they show up, that you get all 12 through the door, and that those 12 people spent on average $800 per new patient. And so you're somewhere north of $9,000 spent in the practice. Once you've kind of figured that out, then you can raise your marketing budget up and really just fill your practice up. It can be that simple. Getting good case acceptance, that's a trick too. That comes down to this whole pre-assessing, getting the team focused on same-day service, getting them involved. It could be working with the doctor themselves. Most of our doctors that kind of get stuck do really good off of referrals and really poorly off of marketing patients. And it's not uncommon that if I sent you 10 marketing patients, that you only get 2 to accept, and 8 just fly out the door. You should get 7 to 8 accept. And so getting all those things working could be treatment coordinator, could be the pre-assessing, the hygienist, could be the doctor. Usually it's all of the above has to be worked on. But once you get that working, you can just light the burner as far as the marketing budget and fill up the practice. Um, and so I would call that as one of those things that if you get that right, it can ramp the practice up to tremendous levels. And that's challenging. So when we go through and try to get marketing working, it can take 90 to 120 days. And that's if if the marketing company you're using is pretty good. If we have to switch marketing companies, it can set us back another 30 to 45 days in the process. So it's not the easiest thing to get working, but once it gets working, it really is that simple as far as growth goes. Um, the kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about was referrals to the practice. Um, if you're not tracking how many new patient referrals that you're getting, when I say referrals, I mean patient to patient referrals. Your practice should be getting at least half of its new patient flow from referrals. And if you're not doing a lot of marketing, it should be nearly all, right? It should be all referral based, meaning you should be getting 20 to 25 referrals a month, period, as a baseline. If you're doing a lot of marketing, it should be at least half. If you're not getting a lot of referrals, if you're below the numbers that I'm talking about, it's an indication basically that patients don't like what they're getting from your office. Point. I mean, just something's wrong is what it means. Patients are coming to your practice and they're going home to their husband and wife and not even be able to convince them to come in. And so it means there's something really wrong with the practice. And kind of the things that it can be could be the case presentation style. So overwhelmed patients, they buy nothing, they buy very little. But if you're really good at persuading patients, you can actually get them to buy something, but they go home and they don't refer. So that's one issue that I see. Number two is the morale of the team. This kind of environment where it's not a fun environment. If you walk around your office and you kind of just see how everybody, what the attitude is like and the morale, and put it on, is it at the A level where everybody's happy to be there, everybody's having fun, it's exciting, it's a dynamic place to work. Where are you at? That impacts referrals to the practice. I mean, patients pick up on the energy of the practice. And if the energy is low, you will not get referrals. You will not get them. So definitely assess your practice and its overall morale as far as the energy of the practice. And this gets back into the leadership, getting bad, rotten apples out of the basket. So bad team members, one bad team member can spoil the rest, and it's death to morale. We are obviously big on bonuses as we try to kind of write and get everybody pointed in the right direction. We'll actually overdo it on bonuses to get the excitement in the game, in the practice, to get everybody thinking same day service and get the engine chugging and get the morale up and lifted. And then, after a while, you can start dialing the bonus back. We have practices that pull it completely. And an object in motion tends to stay in motion. And it will just keep on chugging because that's how it that's how the morale is. You've seen there's a study that people do where they come in a waiting room, and when this bell goes off, somebody just stands up, and then when the bell chimes again, they sit down. And this person's an actor, and they just stand and sit down every time the bell hits. And when somebody else sits down, they see it a couple times, and then they start doing it. And then another person comes in, and they're not actors, it's a social experiment. Then they start standing and sitting. Then the actor leaves, and then after a while, everybody's just standing and sitting, and nobody knows why. So what I'm telling you is you can artificially create this environment through bonus. and then pull it out of the practice, and it will still, if you've got good, strong leadership in place, or you can trim the bonuses way back, and it'll stay going in the same direction. So the power of bonus in creating this morale that we're talking about and getting everybody focused is a powerful weapon. Okay. Uh, and it creates this excitement that patients actually feed off of as far as generating referrals. So I would say those are the two big reasons. There's obviously many others that can stifle referrals to a practice. So capacity, meaning they can't get in quick enough, fees, in and out of network, all these things matter. But those two are the big ones. Your case presentation style and the overall morale or the overall energy, the feel of the practice when a patient interacts with your team. Next, I want to talk about is when to move, when to actually pull the trigger. Dr. Peterson, you said that not always would you say if you build it, they will come. And I totally agree. We've had plenty of people that have pulled the trigger on a big location or a major switch and it didn't fire. There are key aspects that you want to see in a practice before you pull the trigger and decide to do some crazy expansion. And a lot of it's on this list right here that we're talking about. So you want to have good leadership in place, somebody that you really trust, that's built trust amongst the team, and you've got a good chain of command of how things operate. You want to see a good amount of referrals to the practice. You want to see this morale in the practice, great case acceptance off of marketing. You want to see that the marketing is tied to results, meaning I spend X, I get X, where everything's in play. And then expansion is a wise decision. It's a wise decision. But there's one other thing that I want to say about an expansion that I would have reservations about that isn't on this list that I want to point out is a lot of your practices hygiene has been stuck and stayed the same. You got the same number of days of hygiene for the last decade, meaning it's really the patient base, the practice really isn't growing. And so usually when you pull it out of the software, it's over 18 months and you get a number that's back at you as far as the patient base of the practice. But specifically, I'd be looking at hygiene. How many days of hygiene and when was the last time you actually added a day of hygiene and it filled in? For too many practices, it's been too long. And that would be an indication that if hygiene is thin, meaning it's not full, it's not backed out a month or two as far as patients waiting to get into the practice, I would have reservations about why that's happening. And do a little case study, if you will. And you should do this once or twice a year. So you should take a look at new patients seen 7, 8 months ago. So go 7 months back, go 8 months back, and take the 20 or 30 new patients, and bigger practices could be 100, and see how many of those patients have an appointment in hygiene. What you're going to find in a lot of your practices is that's an embarrassing number. It's not good. And if hygiene is not building, and you do that study that I just talked about, and your number is 30%, 40%, well, there's your culprit, meaning you're just not connecting the dots and keeping new patients. But if that number is 60, 70% case retention of new patients, and this is just to their first hygiene visit back to the practice. If that number is 70%, somewhere in that zone, it means that you're losing people later in the experience, meaning for some reason you're losing them after they've been with the practice a couple of years. And that usually means hygiene coordination and out scheduling. meaning you're not at 95% of hygiene patients booked for their next appointment. And you're letting the team slide with 79%, 82%, 84%. Oh, we had a good month, 86, and then drops back down to 78%. If that number is not consistently above 90%, you're going to see an erosion of your practice in time. And it's just a number you've got to track and insist upon that it stays in the 90s. The other thing is hygiene coordination, inefficient hygiene coordination. With these automated softwares that they've got out there now, most of the team just the text goes out, a couple days before we call the list of people that didn't respond to the text, and that should ask them. Ask your team, what's our hygiene coordination? What do you do with the people that don't respond to the text? When do you call them? What do you say? What's the program? Most offices call a day or 2 days before, which is just not enough time. They should be calling immediately after that, the day after that text goes out. Calling, and then give up and say, hey, if we don't hear back from you by the end of business day, we're going to have to release this appointment. So it's really important you call us back. And they should release the appointment. There has to be some kind of system in place that everybody follows, and you have to be a bulldog about it, that it's done well. And then, of course, what do you say when you get somebody on the phone? Hey, got you at on Monday at 9 o'clock. Does that time work good for you? Great. Okay, we'll see you then. Well, that's not good enough. That doesn't cut it in most of the time, in most practices. So these patients that didn't respond to the text are flaky. They're your problem children. They're the ones that don't show and have hygiene fall apart on you every day and make you not feel confident about expanding hygiene. Yes, it's full, Wes, but on the day it falls apart. That's a failure in hygiene coordination. And what they say to the patient when they got them on the phone to confirm, it's important, and it's finicky. Remember how I told you about marketing patients, when how finicky it is to get marketing patients to actually schedule and actually show up? It's the same thing with hygiene coordination. What they say matters. It's the same thing with case acceptance. What you say matters. And adding little things to your verbiage can make the difference, where the lights come on in your practice and finally marketing works. So so pay attention to these things that I'm talking about, and make sure that you're checking your retention numbers. So retention numbers on new patients, how we do in 6-7 months from when we saw them. Are they in the practice still? Are they coming into their hygiene appointments? And then our recall, what's our recall retention in terms of reappointment rate? Where's that falling? And then make sure hygiene coordination is done correctly. Okay, and that ask them, what do you say to people when you get them on the phone to confirm their appointment when they didn't respond to the text? And you're going to go, well, and they wing it. So what you want to do is make sure that patients double opt in. I'll say that again, they double opt in. Okay, got you at 9 o'clock on Monday. Is that time going to work good for you? And the patient says, yes. Hey, before I let you go, could I ask you a favor? And then you go through it again. And if you can't make it for any reason, please call me and ask for me. My name is Wes. I would really appreciate a 40-hour notice. Would you do that for me? That's what I call a double opt-in. You're double asking them, and you're heightening the importance of showing up, just like we do with your schedule, right? We tell the patient, hey, we've got you blocked off for 2 hours with the doctor, and we got the team all involved. So it's really important that you make this appointment because we've got this time dedicated for you, right? So you increase the value of that appointment. Well, they should be doing the same thing with these hygiene patients, and they just don't. Okay, so all these little things have to be connected for the practice to really grow. And this is the short list. I think it was a great list. So strong leadership, a good working relationship between the doctor and the leader, right? Where you guys are both on the journey together and that you're like-minded. I think that was great, Dr. Peterson. Getting marketing to work, getting referrals up and running, getting the morale where they're pointed in the right direction, that the energy is right, getting the wrong people off the bus, so the bad apples, getting them off the bus, building hygiene, making sure that the patient retention is tight in the practice. Okay, and then it's expansion. The other thing would be finding good employees. I would put that on the list. I have it on my short list. How to spot good employees. That can be a fine art, and a lot of you still trying to figure it out. Let's be honest. I mean, it's terribly difficult, terribly difficult. You guys have been doing this for longer than me, and you think that, and I know every one of you have been fooled recently by hires. You know what I mean? Like it's terribly difficult to find a good employee. There's a couple things that, aside from our normal stuff that we talk about, that I'd like to add to this. So red flags is what I want to talk about as far as hiring employees. One red flag for me is what I call takers. There's takers and there's givers and there's reciprocal giving and taking, right? It's reciprocal. And what I mean by that is this about them, about what they get from you and how much you can give them? Or are they givers? Are they wanting to perform well for you in return for pay, right? And the way you spot this is when they talk about money and benefits. And when they bring that up and how important that seems to them. Okay. Sometimes when you're interviewing people, it's like the first thing comes out of their mouth is what's paid vacation? What do you have any health insurance? What's the benefits? What's this? What's that? That's a taker. It's all about them and what they get from you. And they'll reveal it. Really bad takers reveal it right away. They just can't help themselves. It's all about them. Okay. But some are smart enough and kind of wait until the appropriate conversation when they talk about pay. Uh, and that's obviously that has to come up, but you should get a sense of how important did that sound to the person. Did it sound like they really want to know, and like it sounded like, oh, how many days off do I get? What's the vacations like? When do I have access to them? All that kind of stuff is little nuances that you have to pick up on, and you're looking for takers, okay? And try to spot takers, okay? Number two is look for people you like. And I'll say this again, and Dave Ramsey has this saying, and I love it because I believe this is gold. He says, if you got stuck in a car with this person for 4 or 5 hours and you had to do a road trip with them, would you enjoy the process sitting next to this person? Or would you feel like, oh man, I'd hate to have to ride with this person for 4 hours? That you should surround yourself with people you like and that you like to be around. And stop looking for necessarily skills. Look first and foremost, do I like this person? Do I want to spend the rest of my life around them? Because that's what happens in practice. You have to be around them. You've got to like who you're with. Okay. So try to identify people that you could spend a 5-hour road trip with and actually enjoy it. Okay. And then look at skills. Do they have the skills for the job? Those are two things that I would add into the hiring process. Takers and the 5-hour road trip. Would you enjoy sitting next to the person for 5 hours? Because
Wes, There's a TED Talk that I recommend, and I send all my prospective leaders by Adam Grant, and it's called Givers and Takers. And in 15 minutes, it will go through it in a lot of detail. And sometimes this is almost something that changes your life. It makes you look at people differently. It makes you look at motivations. And I've just found it to be incredibly helpful for me, not only myself personally, but for anybody that I'm training to be a high level leader in any office.
You've got to spot this. I can't tell you how big of a deal this is. You've got to spot takers. Yeah, and so yeah, what's it called again? Givers and Takers?
Givers and Takers, Adam Grant, TED Talks.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's kind of the list of stuff that I would, and look, obviously we didn't get into adding big cases, and that we could probably do a whole separate one, because that's a whole it's a whole separate, almost a separate way of doing practice inside your practice, right? But look, you only have so many things you can focus on, right? And getting distracted tends to be the issue when we're working with people, is they get distracted into other areas and things that don't really have huge impact. You usually can only focus on and really accomplish 4 or 5 things in a given time period. So like in the next 6 months, if you picked 4 things on this list and really focused on them and really got them dialed in, that's all you can do. And so I would take the challenge of picking a few things off this list and just being all about it for the next couple quarters, and see if you can't perfect, like I said, marketing. Who's coming in off of marketing, how we're answering the phone, success rate, case acceptance, and getting good results. You know, that's a worthy challenge. You know, investing in your leader is another worthy challenge. And they are grown. What we know about leadership is, yes, there's certain innate abilities they have to have, and sometimes you pick wrong, you know, and that you got to restart. But you have to invest in them. You have to build them, and you have to work with them, and that's the key. So, anybody want to throw in their 2 cents before we let you guys go, because we're coming up on the hour? So, anybody got any questions or anything else they want to throw in? Anybody? Okay, so we talked about a ton of different things, and I would say these are the big ones. These are the big movers of practices. So if you're like, oh, we're not focused on many of those, this webinar, you should come back from it going, oh, geez, let's make these couple of these things our focus. Most of you should be like, yes, we're focused in a lot of these areas. If you're not, I can tell you that that's probably what's holding you back, for sure. All right, so thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a month. If you got any questions, give Lori a call, and Dr. Peterson or I will, help you guys out. That's what we're here for. All right, thank you.